On today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, yes, the Houston Texans dropped the 30 bomb on the Dallas Cowboys, but are there still concerns about CJ Stroud and his lack of touchdowns? Also, we got to look at DeMeco Ryans' defense. They have been balling.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation, welcome to the Locked On Texans podcast. I'm credentialed media member and Texans football analyst John, some sports guy Hickman, alongside Texans credentialed media member and the man with the big hat and the even bigger smile, Brian Big Stars Bearfield. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Shout out to all of our everydayers, our players from the Himalayas. You guys are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today, we will be talking about DeMeco Ryans' defense. They have been balling, and I think Monday night matchup, was just another exclamation point on how he's come in within 2 years and really transformed this defense into the swarm defense that we have come to see and love. Also, got to give some love to the offensive line, right? They've been beat up all year, Sergeant listeners. And so I think it's important for us to recognize when they have good moments and they put together a good moment and good game against the Dallas Cowboys. We got to look at getting CJ Stroud back on track. A lot of people have talked about the lack of touchdowns from CJ Stroud as of late. And so what can the Houston Texans do to get that going? Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Big Sarge,
what's going on?
Though the Houston Texans dropped 34 points against the Dallas Cowboys, who, by the way, they've allowed, I think it's 38 points at home to opposing teams, none of those points came from a CJ Stroud touchdown. He had an interception for a pass that was intended to Nico Collins, a couple of drops, a couple of bad balls, a couple of uncharacteristic throws that on Tuesday, I said that some of those uncharacteristic plays and moments that we accustomed to CJ not making have become a little bit more a part of his game. So I think it is a valid conversation for us to have, just to sit back and say, okay, man, how can CJ Stroud get back on track? The running game got back on track. Defense got back on track. Getting Nico Collins is going to help, but what can he do?
John, the one thing that CJ Stroud can do to get himself back on track is just be CJ Stroud. You don't need to overthink it. You don't need to do too much. You just need to be CJ Stroud. And on Monday night against the Dallas Cowboys, what you saw was remnants of the old CJ Stroud coming back. And there's been a lot of issues. You know, he's had to deal with a lot of injuries as well on the offensive side of the ball. You know, losing Nico for a while, losing Stephon Diggs for the year, losing Tank for a game. Joe Mixon was out for a game. You lose the offensive lineman. Now that continuity has to change. And so all it's going to take is just some consistency from the Houston Texans offense. I don't think that I'm believe that if the Houston Texans can go injury-free from now throughout the playoffs, they can definitely make a run, because what CJ also does is he's definitely good at adjusting, but he's definitely good at adjusting to different types of things. But when he has consistency, that's when you see the CJ Stroud be CJ Stroud. Now, they have two winnable games we've looked at coming up here against the Tennessee Titans and the Jacksonville Jaguars. What I predict that he's going to do against the Tennessee Titans is have that 300-yard passing game. And then against the Jacksonville Jaguars, have another 300-yard passing game, leading them into the bye week. Now, I understand the Tennessee Titans have the number 3 ranked defense in the NFL, if I'm not mistaken. And so they're not going to make it easy on them. But what I feel like the Tennessee Titans are going to come in and do, they're going to come in and focus on the run, which is something that Bobby Slowick probably wants them to do especially after the performance of Joe Mixon on Monday night with that 109 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. So when the Tennessee Titans have to make sure that they're stopping the run game, they're also going to have to stop Joe Mixon. And what CJ showed on Monday night against the Dallas Cowboys was he's also not afraid to spread the ball around. Now, I know that Nico was
right, which was a very good thing to see.
yeah, and I know that Nico wasn't on the field a lot because he was on a snap count, but him getting 7 targets. We talked about this. Him getting 7 targets, Tank getting 7 targets, Mechie getting 3 targets. I think Dalton Schultz got 5 targets. Stover had 2 or 3 targets. And so he's starting to get comfortable as far as passing the ball around, and he's also getting used to Jared Patterson being a center again and Juice Scruggs being his left guard.
You know, I also think Joe Mixon is going to play a huge part in CJ Stroud getting back on track, right? Simply because Nico is going to get more and more snaps, right? He's going to get comfortable coming back from that injury. His body will get back to the NFL game. I'm not worried about that, but I think right now the source of life for this offense is Joe Mixon. And so what that's going to do is, you know, a lot of teams, especially looking at the Tennessee Titans, a good defense, a lot of teams are going to game plan for, hey, we got to stop Nico and we got to stop Joe Mixon. And Joe Mixon, I think right now is a little bit higher on the priority list. But I say that to say, if that's going to be the case moving forward, then you're looking at CJ Stroud. If we go back to the game against the Dallas Cowboys, 10 of 11 on play actions for 108 yards, 90.9 completion percentage, 9.8 yards per attempt, right? So you're looking at that running game they're gonna bring defenses up, right? And a lot of these teams throughout the NFL this year, they really did a good job of eliminating big plays by playing a lot of too high safety. So you're going to see defenses adjust to the Texans being able to hand the ball off to Joe Mixon. And then that's where you're going to see guys like a Tank, guys like a John Mechie, who I can't wait to see how he continues to flourish in his role. And Dalton Schultz, so I thought had a good game, really did a very good job freeing up a defender so Joe Mixon can score a touchdown against the Dallas Cowboys. But those guys that traditionally kind of eat underneath, that's where we're going to see the game of CJ Stroud kind of just open up a little bit more and be a little bit more consistent with, trying to get those bigger plays, because we know that he's looking for that big play. And if it wasn't for Laramie Tunsil penalty to open up the game, we would have sat back and said, wow, Nico Collins does fix everything after a 70-yard TD that was called back. And so I think the running game for Houston is going to really help out CJ Stroud getting back on track, because defenses are going to have to respect that a little bit more than what they are respecting CJ. But it will be up to him to connect on these open passes. It will be up to him to limit those turnovers, and it will be up to him to return back to his to the self that we saw from him when he was an accurate quarterback, putting the ball on the money, putting it to where only the receiver can make a play on it, or you lived for another down. So I do think there's been some things in CJ's game that's been a little off.
Yeah.
And it started for me against that New York Jets game. Was that the game he got sacked 9 times?
8 times.
Around that time.
Yeah.
The issue started against the New York Jets when those hits really piled up. You can see him kind of pulling off from some of those passes.
Yeah.
So it's good to get an offensive line that played as well as they did. Hopefully they continue to play as well as they did against the Dallas Cowboys, against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and, of course, against the Tennessee Titans, which is their next matchup. They have a very good D-line when healthy. But for CJ, Joe Mixon is going to open things up, and he's going to have to just take what the defense gives him, and hopefully they can find that end zone.
And real quick, John, and the reason why I say that I feel like CJ is going to have 300 yards passing against the Titans and the Jaguars in back-to-back games is because, I watched and I seen what the Detroit Lions did to Tennessee and what they did to Jacksonville. John, at home, they're averaging 52 points a game against both of those opponents. And so I'm not looking for the Houston Texans to score 52 points, but I'm looking for another 30-plus point
Absolutely.
performance coming up. And this time, those 30 points, CJ's going to have a hand in both of those 30-point victories.
As far as I think, before we move on, because we got to move on, but I think that's what the talking point is really stemming from. Yeah, we dropped 34. Yeah, we had a great return TD from Derek Barnett and Joe Mixon. He scored 3 TDs by himself. Yeah, we had all of that, but we all know this is a quarterback league, and CJ is this team's franchise quarterback, and he hasn't been able to consistently score points on his own. So I think the worry is, if we're going to be a real team that can compete, we need the best out of CJ Stroud, which we haven't got for the most part of this year due to injuries and due to everything that's come about, especially offensive line play. But people want to see CJ in that end zone. You know who else want to see CJ in that end zone?
Who's that?
CJ Stroud. So it's one of those situations where you sit back and say, don't worry, he'll get there. And when he does get there, just like Joe Mixon getting his mojo back, CJ will get his mojo back as well. All they got to do is smell it one time. He's going to keep going back.
Hey, John, I almost called him. When you said who wants to see their mojo return, I said, oh, we're talking about Coleridge Bernard Stroud Jr.?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
You're going to call him his government.
Yeah, for sure.
We got to give some love to the offensive line, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
They had a good game. So let's talk about the offensive line and more on the Locked On Texans podcast. But first, ladies and gentlemen, PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You pick more or less on at least 2 player stat projections for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. Like I mentioned, you can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get in on action in sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. And PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineup stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks keeps your lineup alive. That's probably my favorite feature from PrizePicks because things happen, but I still got money that I want to make, right? So right now, download the app today, the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. And also, ladies and gentlemen, weekend is coming, and this is specifically for my teachers out there. I know y'all dealing with them kids. I know y'all tired of dealing with them kids. And this Friday, when y'all go on this Thanksgiving break, I know I'm going to see y'all out everywhere in the city of Houston getting your drink on. And that's okay. But before you get your drink on, take Z-Biotics. Z-Biotics is the pre-alcohol probiotic drink by Z-Biotics. They are the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. And a lot of y'all are a little older, so y'all need this. I needed it as well. This is how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It is this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best the very next morning. So some of y'all may need to take it right before you pull off your campus grounds. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and also get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On NFL at checkout. That is zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL. Z-Biotics is back with 100% money back guarantee. So even if you're not satisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. Welcome back, Battle Red Nation. Please subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your audio podcast. Big Sarge, we have dogged this offensive line now we are in week 11 now
Yep.
for about 10 weeks.
11 weeks.
Well,
Now,
you know what? Let's be fair. We praised them week 1 against the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah.
So 9 weeks, we really killed this offensive line. But the fact remains is, listen, those guys had a very good game. You also saw Michael Parsons, just your boy,
Yep.
run from Laramie Tunsil in that smoke.
Right.
How often did he line up against Laramie Tunsil?
He had 10 pressures against Laramie.
Was that Laramie? I thought that was Titus.
I mean, oh, you said Laramie.
Laramie. He ran from Laramie. So, I'm going to go to this other side.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
He did have 10 pressures, one tackle, but overall, you can get this running game back on track. And when you can not allow your quarterback to get hit, you got to give those guys some love, Sarge.
Yep, for sure, man. And listen, I know that we joke around and play, but I will say this, John, being around those guys in that locker room, as far as that offensive line is concerned, with Laramie Tunsil, Juice Scruggs, Jared Patterson, Shaq Mason, and Titus Howard. A lot of people want to make jokes about him. A lot of people want to call him the best dress. They worry more about their fashion than they do looking at their playbook. But nobody takes more pride in what they're doing than that offensive line. They are a very close, cohesive unit inside of that locker room. And I say nobody. They all position groups, they stick close together. That defensive line is together, but that offensive line and John, I'm going to tell you, the viewers, listeners, and the fans, that they hear it as well. They hear the criticism. They know and they embrace it. They're accountable for the things that they do. And so they have been hearing it for a very long time about how they haven't been playing well, how the run game hasn't been exactly what it needs to be, how the protection of CJ Stroud isn't what it's supposed to be, how CJ may have taken a step back this year as far as numbers wise, and that's because he's constantly under pressure or he's constantly being sacked, and there was no continuity to that front five. And so to see them get somewhat, and you could see it, John, against the Detroit Lions, they started to get themselves back on track, especially with, like what we said, with Jared Patterson being the center and Juice Scruggs being the guard, and those two learning to play with each other again. And so that next week, going into that Monday night game against the Dallas Cowboys, of course, they had some penalties. You're going to have those type of penalties when you're, not only are you worried about what Michael Parsons is doing, but Michael Parsons, what he does is he allows the rest of the defensive line to do what they need to do if they can do it, right?
Right.
And then you have to worry about DeMarvion Overshown, who plays that linebacker position the way that he plays it, with a lot of speed. And I'm going to be honest with you, John. Side note, to slow down Michael Parsons and to slow down Overshown, that's a huge that's a huge thing to do for that offensive line, especially when, John, I can see, there are signs that, Overshown looks like Michael Parsons did in his rookie year as far as being able to get through creases and cause havoc and be disruptive. And so he was able to get to the backfield like a couple of times, but for the most part, they were able to contain him as well. So you have to give this offensive line some love. And I'm going to be, John, coming into that locker room after the game, one of the first things Laramie said was, I didn't think I was that far downfield and I was blocked. Yeah. He said, I hate that touchdown got called back, especially because Nico needed it. We needed it. We set the tone, but I didn't realize I was that far downfield. So I'm saying all that to say that, yes, they take accountability for the things that they done. And we have bashed them since the Chicago Bears game all the way up, through the Lions game. And so they do deserve some love on being able to help Joe Mixon get 109 yards rushing, to help him get those 3 touchdowns, and to keep a pretty much clean pocket for CJ Stroud. Even though he didn't throw for a touchdown, he was still able to move the ball and move the chains.
Which is what you really want to see. By the way, Overshown 6 of 6. He 6 targets, 6 catches, 69 yards, a pass rating of almost 115. I think
I
he
feel
is
like
the
that's
Texans
personal,
level.
John. I feel like that's because he said that they run the state of Texas.
I think he may be running behind the Texans because they run the state of Texas right now. And also, CJ Stroud is nearly at 2,700 passing yards. And so we look at a sophomore slump and him falling off. The TDs aren't there. The yards have been there. But back to the offensive line, you know what I really loved from Monday night's matchup was just how balanced they played, right? You go back to the Detroit Lions game, I thought that was at the time their best game protecting CJ Stroud all year. But the criticism leaving out of that game was, well, they couldn't run the ball.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this was a game, and we talked about this offense getting going all last week, the matchups and everything. But Sarge, you mentioned how light this Dallas defensive line is and how that should play in the favor of the offensive line for the Houston Texans. The worry for me was, okay, how often have they done the right things the right way? But this was one of those games where they did everything that made sense and they did it to perfection. I mean, initial contact blocks at the line of scrimmage, getting up to the second level and creating additional running lanes for the running backs to cut back into. So when you look at where they are now after that Dallas Cowboy game and what I personally want to see, how many of these games can they string together where we leave out of that game? And I'm talking to you after we leave the NRG Stadium and I say, hey, man, they played an overall very good balanced game. There was not one side of that offense that lacked because the offensive line wasn't able to control it in this area, or they weren't able to control it in this area. CJ Stroud was able to have time in the pocket and deliver throws downfield. Joe Mixon was able to continue to have those open running lanes. And that's the great part about playing a team like Dallas where they are right now. They're so bad in so many different areas. Teams are able to come in and say, okay, you know what? It was rough for us last week, but let's get better by taking on this team that I think at this point should be tanking. But so I want to shout out to the offensive line. Those guys really had a good game.
Real quickly, John, is this the unit that you stick with even when Kenyon Green comes off the IR?
Yes. Hey, listen, man.
Man,
that's one of them questions you just wasted your breath.
How?
Listen, and I'm gonna say this, man, and this is not a shot at the character of the young man. And it's so crazy to me now that I'm up in somewhat age and I'm saying young man a lot. I don't think I don't think Kenyon Green should play another game as a Houston Texan. A lot of people love to see hometown players play at home, especially when they start their career, but that's more so of when you end your career off. Because playing at home can bring a lot of additional expectations that a player may not be ready for when they come into the league. Coming into the league, you're still a young man. And that comes with a growth process that if you play it at home, sometimes that growth can get stunted a little bit. So I really want him to succeed mentally and physically.
Go somewhere.
I don't know if maybe he can, come back in year 8 or 9, but I want him to have a year 8 or 9 type of career. And so I don't think he should, suit up for the Houston Texans again, unless it's a dire need. But at this point, I think it's over.
And then, John, I know, and listen, because we're talking about the offensive line, and I just have to ask because I know we have to move on. But so, who is it an indictment on if he does leave and have a good 8 or 9 year career?
Yeah, that would be Houston.
Okay.
I'll say I can take it a step further really quick, and we got to go. But I don't know how many good offensive linemen the Houston Texans have developed in their 22-year franchise career. Dwayne Brown, yeah, monster. But he was one of those can't miss prospects coming out. Laramie Tunsil was traded for. The up and down career of Titus Howard moving to so many different positions, that messed his career up. And I think right now he is definitely on the tail end of his career. I mean, to your point, Michael Parsons really kind of beat him up Monday night. I'm not sure how many offensive linemen.
He kept him off CJ.
He kept him off CJ. Thankfully, CJ was able to step up in that pocket a few times. But I don't know how many offensive linemen Houston has developed.
Maybe it's going to be Jared and Juice. And Blake.
But I do think Blake and Jared and Juice, I think they'll give him another shot. I think those guys are going to be byproducts of we got to go in a different direction with our coach at that position. Because I don't know how much faith they have left in Chris Stroud, but on the opposite side of the ball, hey man, Henry T.
Yeah.
Hey man, Jalen Petrie.
Hey.
Hey man, Kalen Bullock, the rookie. The defense.
Sting.
Listen, I don't even gotta say Sting. The defense is out there taking boys for their lunch money. So
Hey,
we gotta show them some love, Sarge. We're gonna do that, of course, when we come back from the Locked On Texans break. But first, guys, I want to let you guys know that how precious our time is. Time is the most precious commodity, so you don't want to waste it scrolling through mind-numbing content for hours and hours. Do something with yourself. Learn a little bit. So how can we spend time wisely to improve ourselves? You got history, economics, the great works of literature. We got a lot of different things that our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering that you can sit down and learn about. They are offering more than 40 free online courses, including The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic, and what I just started on myself personally, the brand new documentary style course on Marxism, socialism, and communism. All of Hillsdale courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. So go to hillsdale.edu/locked on to enroll. There's no cost, so it's really free. Trust me, I'm logged in right now. I've been enjoying the courses. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/locked on to register. Again, hillsdale.edu/locked on to register. And welcome back, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Big Sarge, check this number out. And shout out to my boy DJ Bienemy from ESPN. Derek Stingley, while guarding Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, CeeDee Lamb, Mike Williams, and DJ Moore. 17 targets, only 95 yards, 5 PBUs, and 2 interceptions. He has been the catalyst for this secondary. And for the most part of the season, we talked about Azeez being the catalyst for this defense. I think a large part of that was due to not having Christian Harris out on that field.
Yep.
But through 11 weeks, Derek Stingley, I think, has been by far the elite defensive player on this team. And Sunday night was just a magnifying glass on look at the talent Houston has at that cornerback position.
John, I think that DeMeco Ryans theme song should be every time you walk into the locker room. I think they should play this because you have this on the side. We fly high, no lie, and you know it.
Ballin'!
Hey, because
let me grow my braids back with the dirty braids on the side and brush them back.
For sure. Because John, let me tell you something. You're right. The way that this defense has been playing, and some people had some complaints about the amount of yards that they gave up to Cooper Rush on Monday night. But I mean,
60 attempts is gonna happen.
Exactly, it's definitely going to happen. And then you give up almost 70 yards on one play to Turpin. So and that's one of the things that has plagued them this year has been some big plays, some explosive plays given up, but they're not giving them up consistently. And so when you look at a player like Derek Stingley, I think that Derek Stingley is on a mission, and I don't think that he liked hearing all of the love and the accolades and the praises that Sauce Gardner was getting up in New York. And he's saying, okay, well, wait a minute now, hold on, because I was rated the top defensive back in the nation as soon as I stepped onto LSU's campus. I know the level of competition that I went up against just in college alone is what a lot of people today are calling who are saying that these guys have a trajectory of being Hall of Famers. And Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. And I went up against them every day in practice. And, and there's some other players that he talked about that he went up against as well. So, John, with that being said, he's one of those guys, man. He's just playing on a whole nother level. Derek Stingley is playing on a whole nother level. And he got a game ball from DeMeco Ryans after Monday night because DeMeco knows when to travel him and when not to travel him. And so last night they definitely need him, especially with Kamari Lassiter still being in the concussion protocol. But John, here's the thing: when you look at that defense and you look at what Danielle Hunter did last night, he had 8 pressures and 2 sacks against Terrence Steele, the right tackle for the Dallas Cowboys, who's the best, outside of Zach Martin. That right side of the line is the best side of the line for the Dallas Cowboys. But for him to have those 8 pressures and those 2 sacks, we're talking about that. But imagine when they do get Kamari Lassiter back. Imagine when Will Anderson Jr. comes back. Like this defensive unit, John, we haven't seen them as a whole in a very long time because you remember you also had Jimmy Ward miss some time. And so you've had some of the defensive tackles miss some time. So, John, when they get everybody back, when they're fully healthy, when they're doing everything that they need to do, when they have a full roster on the defensive side of the ball, John, they may end up this season with the number 1 defense in the league.
I also want to give DeMeco Ryans a lot of credit for 2 things. And then when he stepped into this franchise, everybody got excited for what he'll bring for Christian Harris. And we saw that on the back end of last year. Haven't seen it yet. And I was talking to one of my best friends, and I made this statement that Henry T has kind of made Christian Harris expendable at this point. But
expendable for what? You talking about they got a new movie coming out, Expendable 6 or something?
Well, if they did have a new movie called Expendable 6, maybe starring Christian Harris, because I think Henry T has like not only has he earned that role, that job, but it's his. I don't know when the last time we said Henry T had a bad game.
John,
I don't know.
You got to add to this group chat because I got some things that he said. Henry T is my guy. Like Henry Toto is my guy.
But
John,
let's be fair. When was the last time we sat back and really? You may nitpick it here and there, but when was the last bad Henry T game?
Yeah, John, it's been a minute. And
he's played some good football, man. Like
John, but he only played 1 snap in the second half of Monday night's game. He had 6 tackles in the first half. Okay. Devin White got the majority of snaps. Now,
and that's what I had wrote. Like Devin White was read off by a lot of people.
Henry T could be hurt. There could be some concussion things going on. I'm not saying that it is. I have no facts on that. I'm just saying though. But I love Henry T, but Christian Harris is a whole different monster.
And it could be I'm a prisoner of the moment because we haven't seen him play for 11 weeks. Well, further than that, but I just love what we saw from Henry T under DeMeco Ryans and his growth. But Devin White was wrote off. Yeah. And he's come in and he's played some good football for the Houston Texans in his role. His role is minor. It's not a big role, but every championship team, you got players that know their role and they play it well. And I think since Devin White has arrived, he's played well. And they also use him in a way that maximizes his strength and not necessarily his name. Yeah. That's the issue in the NFL, and that's when I want people to just sit back and say some of these guys are just names in their point now, and teams are not necessarily using them right. But DeMeco and Matt Burke, who we got to talk a lot more about as a coordinator, they use players in the right way. So I look at this defense and how much they've been balling, Sarge. It's the small things that has really helped this defense be one of the better defenses in the NFL. And, of course, you got 2 rookies in that secondary that don't give a damn who you are.
Exactly.
They gonna take your lunch money as well. We got more Texans talk throughout the week. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans. Give me a follow at John_Hickman12. And as always, make sure you subscribe, like, and comment to the podcast on YouTube.
And you can follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Big Star Sports with a Z at the end.
Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.